Welcome to the Be Your Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Claire Chancellor, and this is the space where we get to explore all things spiritual so that you can live a life with passion and purpose. Today's a really big dream come true for me. I get to talk to my NLP trainer, Rik Schnabel. He's a phenomenal brain untrainer, author, radio host, NLP trainer, obviously. And, just having a conversation with him to get a deeper understanding of how he sees NLP, how NLP's modernized over the last 20 years, and what's his plans for the future. I'm absolutely so excited to talk to him and explore all things NLP, and maybe I can get a little bit more of his spiritual insights into into his path in the next chapter for him. So let's get started because I can't wait to have this conversation. Okay, so I want to say a really big welcome, Rik Schnabel here with us today, and we're going to talk all things NLP, manifesting and transformational modalities and processes, right, Rik?
That sounds absolutely perfect. Sounds like we're going to go into an interesting tunnel.
Absolutely. That's where I like to have those conversations. Rik, I was introduced to you back in 2012. I heard your voice on the NLP pre-training, which since then must be out there absolutely worldwide. But I remember hearing your voice and just that instant pull of like, I have to meet this man. And it was just getting to know you, your business model, how your family values, how you hold yourself, and everything that you bring to the world, Rik. It's been such an inspiration and an honor to watch you on your journey.
That's so cool. I didn't know my voice did all that.
Yeah, even do you remember recording that? Because even just the Elvis voice that you did, it still stays with me. I remember where I was sitting in the car when I heard you do the strategy scrambler, the Elvis voice, and I was like, what am I in for when I heard that NLP pre-training?
Well, actually, there's a bit of a story behind that. Those audios happened because I actually didn't want to teach NLP. That's not where I was going. I was just so insatiable about NLP that I just kept going until I ran out of training. And the only thing I could do with it is become a trainer or be a coach.
I
And
didn't know that.
yeah. And it was actually my coach, who was a wonderful spiritual coach that I was working. Well, actually, I was working with three coaches at the time, and my spiritual coach said, okay, what's next for Rik Schnabel? And I said, I don't know. I'm just going to keep coaching like this. This is all going great. I'm really enjoying it. And she said, no. What's next for Rik Schnabel? And I said, I don't really know how to answer that question. And then she asked a better question. She said, what do you really care about? And all of a sudden these words came out of my mouth, and I said, I care about humanity, and the only way that I believe humanity is going to move forward is with people like trainers and authors and speakers and coaches. And I really want to bring the business side as well as all the other side to coaches. I really want to help them. And she said, so you're going to be a trainer then? and I said, well, being quite fluid and open, I said, yeah, well, I guess so. And then she said, so what's your commitment to this? What are you going to do as a result of our coaching today? And I said, okay, I'm going to put it on my website. I'm going to advertise that I am now going to teach NLP. And what she didn't know is that I hid it. You had to hit about 5 links before you found it. And I was coming home from coaching one day, and back in the days of the message recorder, with the cassette tape, and I pressed, the messages, and there was this one message from a lady called Denise, and she said, "Hi, my name's Denise, and I'm really interested in your NLP training." I went, "No," and so I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I'll give her a call. So I called her, and she was in a bookstore, and she said, oh my God, she said, and then she muffled the phone so I couldn't hear what she was saying. And then what I learned later, she said, oh my God, the guy who's written this book is just calling me. So she had my first book in her hands,
Oh,
which was amazing. But there's a story behind that story.
of course
That,
there is.
well, there was a woman in the bookstore, the place she went to when I was doing my book launch. This woman poked her head in the door and said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "It's a book launch." And she said, "Can I come in?" And I said, "Sure." And she bought stacks of books and put it in a bookstore. And that's how this woman, Denise, found the book, found me, and all of this unraveled. But to answer your question now, those audios, what essentially happened was I had to create the course between coaching, and I would come home sometimes at 11 p.m. at night, midnight. So I'd be there at 1 a.m. in the morning going, okay, now I'd like to talk about, and you would have noticed that my voice is a little quiet every now and then. And it's because I didn't want to wake everyone up in the house as I was
Oh my.
recording all these audios.
So all of this has come back from that one spiritual coach asking that one question,
Yeah.
what do you care about?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of those
Absolutely.
doors and synchronicities, because you said yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that
Which,
mind blowing?
well, it was, I can remember I was sitting with Rebecca, my wife, and, we had an apartment in South Bank in Victoria at the time. And I went out, we used to sit on the balcony and watch the world go past. And I came out with a contract. And I said, "Are you okay if I sign this contract?" And it was just a piece of cardboard, a bit of gold cardboard, I remember, with all this writing on it. And it was a contract with the universe.
Mm.
And I basically said, "I will do whatever I can to help as many people as I can." you know,
Where is that
and
piece of paper now, Rik?
it's archived now. It's in. I have these little boxes called sentimental boxes,
Mm.
and I strap them up, tape them up, and I have a plan that when I get to 100, I'm going to open up these boxes and revisit my life. So they're all kind of tucked away, and it's in one of those boxes.
Wow, wow, wow. So then from signing that contract with the universe, you've been an NLP coach for 20 years. How long have you been a trainer for?
I've been a trainer since 2006, so 18 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember that day that you handed me my NLP trainer certificate, because there it is there, everybody.
Woohoo! Yes, I can see it. that was a
I think
that was a huge day.
yeah, flooded tears all over your shoulder. It was such a relief, because for me that had been that 10-year dream come true, and it was, yeah, it still brings tears to my eyes. So that was again, I'm probably gonna that's really resonated with me, that one question, what do you care about, Rik? And then yeah, it changes lives.
Yeah. Well, I remember that day when you graduated as a trainer. I mean, that was a huge day. And we had a very cool group. In your group was a very cool. Well, they were all cool, of course, but your
We had
group.
the fun group.
Well, you guys were very passionate about it, and very caring about why you were doing it. And I remember at one point in my life, I was in my kitchen and I was just looking out the window and I was thinking to myself, how does the world really change? Like, how does it really change? Everyone talks about changing the world, but how does it really change? And I remember sitting with this for a while, and I remember baking or cooking or something like that. And I'm thinking about this question. And the answer was, quite obvious, but not at first. And that is that the way that the world really changes is with trainers and coaches and, people who put themselves out there. And so that was a huge day for you.
Mm.
That's when you all of a sudden, stepped up to a whole different level, and you've been shining ever since.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like, yeah, that day was massive for me. And a little side story on that. The next day I went out and bought it was another dream of mine to have a Blenheim Cavalier, and I went out and bought Richie. We named him after Richard Bandler, so I now live with Richard Bandler, the co-founder of NLP. And he's just as naughty and pushes the boundaries just as much. So that's how much I was passionate about that day and that certificate and graduating. And but I am curious, Rik, how have you seen NLP modernized over those 20 years?
Well, I remember at one point, one of my trainers showed a hierarchy of NLP and, where it came from and how it morphed and graduated and progressed and so forth. And the thing that I think, well, what he did is he showed right up until that very point. But, that was 18 years ago. And now there's been people like yourself, myself, and others who have also added into that sphere and that space. So once upon a time, NLP was very much questions, processes, and so forth. But now what has come to it is a whole host of extra insights, the metaphysical insights, the spiritual insights, the other modalities. Even, there are people who are blending things like EFT and anchoring and all sorts of things.
Kinesiology, yeah.
Yep, kinesiology and all those sorts of extra modifications to it. So it has evolved in a big way, I'd say, even more so over the last 20 years.
Well, it goes to show when Richard Bandler and John Grinder did create it, like the world needed that self-empowerment, the tools, the processes
Yeah.
that must, for me, that must have been channeled in on some level, like channeling in a book. That must have come in at a time when we needed it the most, and to see it ripple out into the world, like it's wow. But my question is, Rik, have you ever met Richard Bandler or John Grinder?
No, I haven't met either of them. I've worked with John's brother, Michael Grinder, who is just as clever, and they both walk the same. You know how they kind of walk on tippy toes as they walk around, doing their trainings. But Michael Grinder is an amazing, amazing guy. He does a lot of face reading as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I had a synchronicity piece happen to me in Sydney when I was training under him. And I had, it was I think, 3-day training. And the last day, I had a dinner engagement with someone who I'd done some work with. And I'm thinking to myself, I'd love to catch up with you this evening and have dinner. That would be awesome. But I actually want to catch up with Michael.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and it was minutes later, I got this text from her saying, "I'm so sorry, but I've got the flu and I can't catch up this evening." And I
Yeah.
said,
Not a
cool,
problem.
get well, And then at the end of the day, like Michael had done my reading, my face reading. He told me things that I didn't even know. And then we caught up, and he said, "Where can I get a really good gelato around here?" Because he's a big fan of gelato. And so I said, "I know where." So we'll go out, and we went out, and we walk in there, and it just happened to be Jimmy Barnes, standing in there at the same time. And I went up to Jimmy Barnes. I said, "Jimmy, you need to meet Michael. He's just as amazing as you." And Jimmy goes, "Who's Michael?" So anyway, this big conversation happened, but it was amazing, amazing evening. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. And so because that's interesting synchronicity, because I'm also trained in the art of Chinese face reading and reading the lines and things, and then being able to utilize that within the NLP processes. So that's some yummy information. I'm gonna have to go check Michael. I didn't know that
Yeah,
he focused on that. So that's interesting.
yeah. There's a book that he wrote, and it'll come to me before we finish.
So
The
other than
Unusual Obvious.
the unusual obvious, everybody get
Yeah.
onto that one. We'll be checking that out. Thank you, Rik. But you have met the other king of NLP, Tony Robbins. Is that right?
Yeah. In fact, I met him again this morning. I had this long, long dream of Tony Robbins this morning. So I was talking with him for ages this morning.
On the astral or actually human? You haven't been talking to him.
No, I wasn't talking on the astral. So
You two. What do you see about Tony that's been able to create his level of success, Rik?
I think one thing he shared with me at one point is he shared a limitation that he
Hmm.
said that he never ever wanted to really change. And the limitation that he had was a little bit similar to my own in that he didn't get enough love from his father. And I didn't get what I believe enough love from my mother. And Tony shared with me that he had four fathers, as everyone knows. And the father that stayed the least amount of time was the one that he connected to in the biggest way. So, what that happens, through his life is that if you look at Tony's audiences, they're predominantly men.
Hmm.
And what he is aiming to do is he's aiming to satisfy men. He wants men to be able to say, "Aren't you amazing, Tony? Aren't you amazing?" And it's the sort of dialogue that
Uh,
he wanted from his father.
yep. Yep.
Whereas, my audiences tend to be more predominantly female, and for the very same reasons.
Yep.
And I've come to understand through the coaching that I get, understand that at a much, much deeper level. So, I mean, Tony's a great guy. He's got a big, big heart. He really has. A lot of people think he's all about the money and blah, 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 blah. But, yes, he respects and values money, but he's not doing it for the money. I mean, he could have retired many, many years ago, and he hasn't. So that's a fairly good indicator that he's doing it for really good reasons, internal reasons.
So you're saying there that that longing for the love from his father is something that he never completely resolved, or he utilizes that need, or
Both, actually,
both?
both answers are correct. So what he's doing is he's using it as a motivation, to basically serve many, many men. And if you look at Tony's message, his message is often a lot more yang than it is yin.
Mm.
And so it does serve very much the men. It can polarize some females, or
Yeah.
equally some men with high feminine energy.
Yep.
So whereas the work that I do tends to be a lot more yin and not as much yang.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Is this the pull that keeps you from retiring? Is this soul contract you've created on that golden piece of paper that keeps you from retiring, Rik?
Well, it's a funny thing. I think retirement is an outdated concept. People retire from things they don't want. And,
Mm.
so it's often, I hate my job. I can't wait to finish it. And then they get out of it. But, in the space that we're in, and what this is like, that you can put something out there like a video, a book, or a training, or do some coaching, and the feedback that comes back fills you somehow.
Mm.
It makes you think, oh wow, fantastic, we got there, we
Yeah.
helped you, or we opened up your mind, and so forth. But it's also a little bit bigger than that to some degree. And at first I thought that I was a coach because I was helping people. Then I thought I was a coach and a trainer because I was helping and teaching people.
Yeah.
But I've come to understand over the years that my big thing is that I want leaders, like yourself. I had COVID at one point, and my whole family had it. This place was like a hospital. Everyone was
Yep.
in their bedrooms
Yep.
and so forth, and and everyone was volunteering. Who's going to go and get some more tissues? And what happened was I was laying, in bed, and I was bored, and I was, beside myself, thinking, I've got things to do. But I couldn't do them. And so I flicked through Facebook, just to lift my spirits, and I saw one of my trainers, who was doing a talk. I saw another one of my students who was writing a book, another one who was running a workshop. And within about 60 flicks, I saw about 30 of my students. And I thought, yeehaw, fantastic. Isn't it amazing that they're all out doing that work? Because you start to realize that the job that you're doing is actually for humanity. It's not for individuals, it's for humanity as a whole. And what you're doing is, and I think a lot of the work that we're doing, and I won't deny that there are some very dark spirits and aspects out there. And I think what we're doing is kind of a little bit behind the curtain. Like
Yeah,
whenever you're doing trainings and things like that, it's not broadly public.
yeah.
It's more privately public, and a lot of the work that we're doing is in the background.
Well, that's the juicy stuff I love to talk about there, Rik, with the that darker aspects, that darker energy, because I have lots of little dot point questions here, but ultimately I really want to know, if you didn't have that dark, turbulent childhood, would you have gone into NLP? Would you have gone into something that brings so much light into the world if you hadn't experienced that polarity?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good question. By the way, before I answer that question, the actual title of the book is The Elusive Obvious by Michael Grinder. Um, so the question is, would I have gone into NLP? Look, in all honesty, if I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth and my life was, wonderfully pleasant, I wouldn't have gone searching.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have, like, when I was 7 years old, my best friend was a library card, and I'd spend so much time in the library reading kids' books until I got bored with kids' books and I went around the corner. And around the corner, there just happened to be the psychology section. And I started reading psychology books, and I can't say I fully understood them,
Mm.
but I was fascinated in them because I thought there was something really wrong with me.
Yeah.
And many of us can make that judgment call if you're not getting, acceptance from the people around you. Or in my case, you're getting punched and hit and kicked, and you know, um, those sorts of things tell you that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're insecure, then it's nothing wrong with them, the perpetrators, the bullies, etc. It's you. And that's really what got me interested in psychology. And then further on, it got me interested in coaching, and then further on into NLP and EFT and you name it. I just can't stop learning. But but there's another element to it as well, and that's empathy.
Mm.
It hurts sometimes seeing people's hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as well as I that you've got to kind of try to create some sort of barrier, bubble, call it what you will, protection zone, to be able to not empathize as much. But something that I find with most coaches and most people that go in this space, they are very empathetic. They care a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that that's part of their own experience. Like, for me, it would make sense that somebody would come in who is destined, their intuition is pulling them onto stage to
Yeah.
be in the light, that it would be destined to have a bit of a chaotic childhood, almost being an empath, sort of looking around, how do I need to be and adjust myself to keep the peace, and then to get to that early adult stage to recognize, no, I don't have to keep the peace. I can actually step into the light, step on the stage, and follow my intuition. But it sounds like you've walked a journey with that sort of people pleasing kind of, I don't know, servant archetype or something there, Rik.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens, I think, if you don't get acceptance, if you don't get, like, we hear so often that love is unconditional, but in reality, it's anything but.
Mm.
And, even the most kind hearted person creates some sort of conditions around love. In the context, if you don't say I love you X amount of times, then I'm out.
Yeah.
If I don't get these love languages met, then I'm out. And
Yeah. But the interesting thing with the unconditional love within theta healing, they actually say don't ask for unconditional love because you're just going to manifest in a pretty much a dog who's what do you want and I'm all here for you and like
Yeah.
there's no grit, there's no excitement,
Yeah.
there's no learning, there's no challenges. So that's where like if you are manifesting in that unconditional love, get pretty boring pretty soon, right, Rik?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when I was writing Raw Courage, I was doing a huge amount of study and research into courage. What is it really? And
Mm.
so forth. And, you know, something that I came to realize in courage is that, you know, my life as a child growing up, my mother, not to kind of, you know, put her down in a hole or anything. I mean, she was a loving mother, but she couldn't control her emotions. And when she was upset, she had to get that upset out of her body and change her state. And the way to do that was to, you know, knock the shit out of me.
Yeah, yep.
And so I was hit a lot. And, you know, I can remember there were times that my father used to look, because he was a very peaceful man, and he used to look and he used to think, oh my God, I can't stand this. So he would pull me off her. And I don't know where I would have ended up had he not done that a number of times. But you know what that does is that creates that feeling inside that that you're bad, you know. And growing up as a kid, I thought I was stupid. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was worth nothing. I had no merit, no value, nothing of any sort of credence. And as a result, you know, I went through these phases of very sad.
Mm.
And, you know, of course, I want to take my own life and, you know, do all those sorts of things as well. So I went through the very sad, but then I got to a point in my later teens where I got very angry. And you know, that anger came out in all sorts of ways. But when I think about it, what it really does is it gives me a huge amount of empathy,
Mm.
you know, because, you know, I've had people who've come to me for coaching and they've gone, oh, Rik, you wouldn't understand. You're successful and your world is so wonderful. You know, you wouldn't understand. You know, I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a this, I'm a that. And I'd go, look, you know, let's not turn this into a competition, but I think I've gone to the extreme. You're just dabbling. You know?
I could relate to that one, Rik. I could relate to someone saying, your life's so magnificent, Claire, you've got no idea. And it's like, well, there was a chapter I was homeless with 4 children, escaping domestic violence. And it's hard to know when you actually tell them that versus I don't want to trigger more of their stuff or like you said, make it a competition. So um only just recently have I started been talking about it and people are surprised and I'm not sure was that is there a good way to manage that, Rik, to let your story start to seep out or
Yeah, I think over the years, I've found that my story comes out in the worst possible times. You know, I've, you know, been on radio and I've gone blah, blah, blah. And I go, whoa, 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 how do you stop that? And, you know, I can remember being on stage once and, you know, it was a big audience of people and I'm talking about vulnerabilities. And all of a sudden, I declare publicly for the first time that I was sexually molested as a child. And, you know, it's kind of like once you let that dog out, you know, there's no getting that dog back in that
yeah.
fenced area. You know, it's out. But how do you manage it? The truth is, I guess you just do.
Mm.
You know, it's kind of like when I was a kid, I used to get scared of pain. You know, pain was something I was really fearful of. And then, you know, one day, I know you know my story where I fell from a tree.
No.
And you don't want to hear that? Okay, cool. You know where I'm going, don't you?
Still have nightmares and I wasn't there. I've got some coaching to do on that, Rik.
Okay, cool. So let's just say if you're watching this, that it was a bad accident that I thought about it. Like, I thought, what would happen if I, got my finger cut, and I think, yow, that would hurt.
Yeah.
But what if it was a lot more than that,
Yeah.
And I guess, I guess the outcome of really what I'm aiming to make here is that it's amazing how our bodies can really allow us to cope. Like, I remember when I had this accident, I was in shock, and I all I felt like was like someone hit me with a baseball bat at the side of my ribs, and I
and then
felt,
realize it was a branch.
yeah, exactly. And so it's amazing what we can tolerate. It's amazing how resilient we can actually be. And, we've all heard stories of people doing incredible physical things that you would almost think is impossible, but it's amazing. I don't think we've even touched the tip of the iceberg as to what we're capable of.
Well, that's a really good segue into a question I've been curious about. With recently you were in hospital and your own experience of pain. The Something that I don't know if I shared with you or I shared with Beck. Like we hadn't been in contact for weeks, if not months, and I was out in my garden, and that tends to mean that I'm sort of in a meditative kind of state, pulling out weeds, connecting in with that higher self. And then suddenly, whoosh, like Beck's energy or her guides or something was standing there, and my heart sort of leaked out of my chest because that's not like Beck's energy to come in so close. And the next thing I know, I get a picture of you in hospital. And I thought, I hope I'm wrong. And there's no reason for me to ever pick up the phone and say, oh, Beck, I've had this premonition, because I don't want to project that
Yeah,
out.
I
And so
get it.
and then the next thing I know, there's a picture of you on Facebook saying you're in hospital. And I just thought, gosh, I hope you're okay, because the sense that I had was that you were completely cocooned in so much healing energy, and Beck was grounded so that she couldn't worry too much. But it turns out it was gallstones or kidney stones, Rik.
It was all of this was from a 9 millimeter kidney stone, that I developed. And, it came on like, wow, the pain. I've experienced a lot of pain in my life, but I've got to say that I haven't experienced this level of pain. So this was
Oh,
a whole new level of pain.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a weird experience. And the thing is, the only time I've ever been in a hospital is with broken bones. I've actually
Yep.
never been in hospital with an illness, never.
I think
So
I'm
this was a
messaged back
shock.
though that the staff at the hospital are going to find some really fascinating conversations with Rik, whether he's on painkillers or he's actually, because I know you'll be coaching those doctors and nurses, right? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah,
Help yourself.
I had to go to hospital from Merimbula up to Canberra, which is a 3-hour jaunt. And I was coaching the paramedic in the back of the ambulance who was having some challenges, and I was giving her some insights and so forth. I can't help it. It's part of me. You know what it's like. It's part of you too.
It is part of me, but it is a fabulous, like you're talking about the antidote to pain, and sometimes that is actually focusing on somebody else.
Totally.
But yeah, has there been any sort of new insights for you in the way that you've connected spiritually, or what that meant for you being in
Yeah.
hospital?
Well, there was one of the things that I wanted to do when I discovered I had this is I wanted to do a whole heap of research into, how do you generate a kidney stone? How does it come about? And fascinating thing is, I had 3 surgeries with this, and which was, I think, just the medical system, extending the profitability of a patient. Sorry, that's me being very cynical there. But the thing was, in the last operation where I had to get a stent taken out of my body, I said to the surgeon, I said, okay, guys, I do not want to ever be here again. So I want to hear from all you experts as
Yeah.
to how never ever to get a kidney stone again. And you know what? Not one of them could actually tell me anything. So
Really?
they, yeah, absolutely. Not one of them actually knew the answer to that.
I'm,
And which was
I'm pretty,
surprising.
yeah, I'm pretty sure you've got a lot of metaphysical coaches under your belt that know exactly why you got that kidney stone.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, I really felt like when COVID happened and all the stuff that happened with, leaders all around the world and mandates and segregation and all the stuff that was happening, it was really, there was a huge amount of pressure and manipulation and coercion that was going on around that time. I got very, very angry about humanity. I
Yeah.
got very, very angry at leaders and how manipulative they were. One of my spiritual coaches told me that this had come from my Atlantean life.
Yeah.
And my role in Atlantis was that I could see how leaders and governments were manipulating. And my job was to keep the bastards honest.
Yeah. Did she
And
take you back to Atlantis? Because that's fun when I take clients back to Atlantis. Like, did you get to see it and experience it?
no, she never took me there. No, she
Mm,
didn't. But I could feel it and I got a very deep sense of it. But it's it's this sense that I have about doing the right thing,
yeah.
for humanity. And I know that there is so much that is going on in the world that is anything but doing the right thing for humanity. And it really triggered me. And I found myself getting very angry, very triggered.
Yeah.
So after and I believe that that's what caused the kidney stone.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing is I ended up getting a lot of coaching around that time. And, we discovered all sorts of things, aspects that I had to get rid of.
Yeah.
And so it was fantastic because I wouldn't have got to them had I not got to intense pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
wouldn't have
then
found them.
and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? When people see on my website, Claire, you offer NLP and past life regression, like what's going on there? How the two
Yeah.
marry? And you're exactly right there that if you're holding on to a level of anger or survivor's guilt or something that's going on, 9 times out of 10, it's a lot easier to go and retrieve that aspect and clear it in a past life. And
Yeah.
ooh, things can change really quickly. Is that what happened for you? Like just things started to shift?
Well, the thing that happened was, certainly as you often feel that sense of peace, where
Mm,
you get that elation. You know how our linguistics is very narrow when it comes to feelings. A lot of people say after a coaching session, "How do you feel?" "I feel lighter."
okay.
How do you feel? "I feel better." "How do you
Mm,
feel?" "I feel relieved." There aren't too many words that people can actually use to actually describe when an aspect shifts out of them and moves out of them. But, me too, I felt a freeing effect. I felt certainly far more understanding,
mm,
about what was actually going down and going on. But there was also a part of me that never ever really wanted to accept that people were malicious or
mm.
reptilian or you know the path that I'm going down here. But I tried not to believe that that existed, but it was really a reality that said, yes, it does, Rik.
What
And
was the
yes,
benefit of pushing that aside? What was the benefit of saying that doesn't, especially knowing your wife is a phenomenal, multidimensional spiritual coach and being herself? What was the benefit of pushing that aside, Rik?
yeah, the benefit of pushing that aside was really there was another thing that was going on at around that time, and that was I was losing my faith in humanity.
Mm,
And I heard myself in my own thinking saying, okay, that's it. I'm and I could feel myself giving up. And I was saying, that's it. I'm not writing any more books. I'm retiring from training. I'm not going to do any more coaching. And I could hear myself shutting that down.
Yeah.
And what was revealed in my coaching is I had lost faith in, let's call it, the universe.
Yeah. Okay.
And I lost faith in that I wasn't being supported anymore, that they'd forgotten me and let me go, and all
Yeah.
of those sorts of feelings were coming up. So that was, again, another really great highlight to get in and do some coaching around that, to get rid of those things.
I'm going to interrupt there. Did you, it's a curious question because you talk about this and I'm going off traveling and looking at it. Is there a possibility you were the same, the age that you are now as the age you were in Atlantis, at one of the falls of Atlantis, you were at the same age? So it sort of triggered that cellular memory and
Yeah,
it's like, I
yeah,
quit then, so therefore it's programmed, I quit now, and you have to overcome that challenge.
yeah. I was actually a little bit older, but I was around the same age.
Love it. Love
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah. And and I really felt this, like, turning 60 for me was a shock.
Mm,
Like, I never expected I was going to get to 21, let alone 60. And going through that 60 corridor
mm,
was quite confronting for me,
mm,
actually. And I started to think about, who am I now? And, I'm sure a lot of people go through that when they go at various age groups and they get to that point where they start to think, what is life about now? But
mm,
it was also a really good opportunity to kind of let go of some of those labels that we give ourselves, such as, I've
mm.
lost my muscles, I've lost my looks, I've lost my, I've lost my hair. Yeah, yeah, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah,
And again, I think it's a fantastic preparation of really getting into, again, carving off some of those egotic elements, those ego
yeah.
aspects that really hold us back.
So that sounds like getting that coaching to move some of those aspects out of the way has brought your passion back.
Yes, it has. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, and I was having such trouble with a book that I'm writing.
Mm,
And I was having a lot, because the next book that I'm releasing is actually going to be my very first nonfiction piece. And it's a whole new playing field. Like, writing, writing nonfiction is completely different to fiction.
yeah.
And there's no character development, there's no plot development, and all of this. And my daughters are amazing in this space. Oh my God, do they know the depths of movies and
Mm,
character development and all of that? And just hearing from them is incredible. But I had difficulties with this book because there was a part of me that wants the world to know some of the manipulations that are actually really going on.
mm,
Like, there's the there's the unclassified medical system that we know of, but of course there's a classified medical system,
yeah.
and there's the political system, and then there's the rulers of the political system. And so I wanted this book to go down those paths
Yeah.
and unveil some of these things, so that people could really understand the manipulations that are happening to them in
Mm,
so many ways in which they're accepting.
yeah. Yeah.
So this book is a pressure cooker.
And
And
is the audience for people of the age of your daughters or for everybody? Is this yeah, who is the audience for this one?
it's a little bit like an animated movie. You know
Mm,
how animated movies have got two conversations going on, one
yeah.
for the adults and one for the kids? It's very much along those lines. So it's got a message for the adults. It's actually targeted towards teenagers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but the message is really for both, for
Yeah.
teenagers and adults alike.
Yeah, or a mum of four teenage daughters. It's Lily's 19th birthday today. Happy birthday, Lily.
Wow, hey, happy birthday, Lily. Oh my God, 19. Where did
but we
that time
need,
go?
yeah, no, but we need those stories out there. I know that the like it's a conversation for another day, but the COVID scenario and how that generation's going to have to pick up the pieces from
Yeah.
that. Maybe their souls knew it was coming, and their Atlanteans coming back to restore everything back to peace. Who knows? But with that in mind, there was a question that came up on Facebook that I'm pretty sure is going to be an angle in this book is if you did have an hour with somebody, if you did have a pocket of their undivided attention, such as in a book, what would you do, say, or what would you do to help somebody, transform and live their life if you've got that undivided attention, Rik?
Well, I think, over the years, I've spent many, many, sleepless nights kind of rolling around in bed going, okay, if you're going to really make a difference in the world, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? And the model that I'm currently working with is the very first piece is that what you really want people to get to is a position of some level of understanding.
Mm.
And then the question is, how do you get someone to a level of understanding? And the model that I've been using is very much nonfiction, which is basically education, giving them pieces of education. But my book, when I first put it out, when I gave it to my daughter as a test, it was 90% written. And I said, "What did you think?" And she said, "The story at the beginning is riveting. It's amazing. I love it." But after that, you started telling me what to do, and I couldn't read anymore. And, it was
Yeah.
kind of like it was an arrow in the heart. It really, really was. But, after recovery, I realized that what I was getting from my daughter was incredible insights. And I
Mm,
thought, I can't make this a nonfiction book. I've got to put these messages in a story.
yeah.
And then I went back to my very beginning of NLP training. And I remember one of my NLP trainers said, people will forget facts, but
Mm,
people will never forget stories. So put
mm,
your facts in the stories, and then your students will take on the learnings and remember them for the rest of their lives. So I made a decision at that point that I was always going to put lots of stories in my trainings, and so this made sense, turn it
yeah.
into a story.
That's how the unconscious mind absorbs, doesn't it? The metaphors
Absolutely.
and tries it on for themselves to shift,
Yeah,
which
and it gets beyond the critical faculty, the BS filter.
yeah, well, I've absolutely watched you very closely with the way that you have facilitated your training, and I've got to say that the way things are modernizing since COVID, I'm loving NLP training over Zoom. I tell you why I like it, Rik, is because the mama bears that are in my group are able to bring their babies to the class or their kids to the class before we get started. Everybody bring a meal, let's chat and converse, and then it gets to right. It's time to study. Then the dads come in and take their little ones, and it's a whole family experience of connection and things that you wouldn't get face to face. And we come together every week for however many weeks, and yeah, it's its own little family. So I really dearly appreciated you modeling that for me to see that ripple effect. Because
Thank you.
on some level, someone was saying that the screen was up of Claire for some reason, and their 18-month-old goes, "Hi, Claire," and then keeps toddling off, and I'm so cute.
That is cool. I've got, sorry,
No, you go. It's all right.
I've got a little story that's similar to that. There was a group I donated a course to a whole bunch of people who just couldn't afford it.
Mm.
And so I've got this one training, on a Thursday night on Zoom. And, all these people were the sort of people who would never, have the money to be able to learn NLP. And it's beautiful watching them, develop and grow. And I could see that many of them had these ideas that I'm not smart enough.
Mm.
And I remember in one training, I said, don't you ever say that to me again. I do not want to hear that. That is BS. Go work with a buddy and get rid of that as a belief system.
Yeah.
And there's this one lady who's in northern Queensland, and every time we get on training, her cat comes to the screen. And she says, my cat never does this at any other time. I've been on Zoom with lots of people and never, ever does this. But always whenever we do training, the cat comes.
Or it wants its healing, right? Or to share in that fun.
Yeah, maybe it's a very wise cat. Maybe it wants to contribute.
Well, but to wrap things up, because I know you're a busy man, you've got things to do, people to see. If you had somebody there who was asking, saying like, oh, the coaching industry, it's too saturated, why would I learn NLP? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, it's something that I get often in trainings. People say, oh my God, there are just so many coaches out there. And, they would say things like, why should I get into the coaching industry when it's so saturated? But I decided to do some research on this, and there was the International Coaching Federation did a study, and they looked at the number of people globally that were accredited coaches, and there was a number. So what I did as a very basic, mathematical formula is I looked at the current population of the world, men, women, children, everyone.
Yeah.
So this is not 100% accurate, but just as a very scant measure, then I divided it by the number of accredited coaches. And it worked out when I first did the research that for every one accredited coach, they have 600,000 clients. So I don't know about you, but I usually take in a maximum of 50 clients a year. That's it. Now I'm currently actually a tad over. I've got about 65 clients, this year, and it's a challenge, keeping up with all of their needs and taking all the bookings. So to take on not 60, let alone 600,000 is ridiculous. And I say to my students, look, the reason you think that is because you're in a room with coaches. You go do seminars and you go do other trainings with coaches. And then what you do is the people that you want to congregate with and talk are coaches. So you just, it's go back to the 7 filters of the brain. Mm-hmm. It's just what you're seeing is the world that you're immersing yourself in. But there is a shortage of coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting perspective, especially for anybody there that's struggling and wanting to manifest clients. They're there. You've got to step up. You've got to step up and do the training. You've got to step up and shine in that light because as you've articulated, Rik, there's the humanity. It has been in a dark place, and it's not the doctors that are going to get us out of it. It's the healers, the coaches, the leaders.
Yeah,
that'll make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. And I kind of feel like, for anyone who's listening out there, if you've been put on the runway, and you're doing Claire's training or something along that line, and you're
Rik's training,
or you're on that runway. The reason you're on that runway is a good reason. And the reason is that it's about you getting more and more courageous as you take off. But, once you create massive momentum and you do take off, everything gets easier and the clients will come. Sure, you've got to market yourself. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to talk to people and so forth. But there are so many people who need coaches, so many people. In fact, I really, truly believe that everybody needs a coach, particularly coaches. You've got to use your own product.
That was one of my cheeky questions I've been wanting to ask, and I didn't, and I was respectful of time. Have you ever been without a coach?
Yes, in my darkest hours.
Mm, yep.
Yeah, and there have been periods of time where I have been without a coach, and they're
Yep.
usually the most tumultuous and the darkest times. And but very short
Yeah.
times. I think in 20 years, I think I've had a coach for most of those 20 years. Which, by the way, I know some people go, "Are you really that screwed up, boy?" But I mean, the truth is, we all have layers, and it's just about continually getting rid of those layers. And I still get coaching.
Yeah, to fly, right? It's just to take
Totally.
to fly, because that's what I've had people go, well, I've had 5 sessions, now what? And like, the thing is, though, once you recognize how easy it is to pivot and get your life feeling lighter, I think of it, it's a little bit of a Mike Claire metaphor, but you get the photographer for the engagement photos and the wedding photos and then the newborn photos and the big family photos. And that's the similar pattern of when you need a coach, because life changes and
Yeah.
you grow and evolve, and you got different questions for different chapters, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And coaching is kind of like fast tracking.
Mm,
I mean, you can stumble your way, you can go out and do lots of YouTubes and get all this conflicting advice and get confused and not know where to go. But get a coach will fast track you. It'll move things much, much quicker.
yay. Thank you for that, Rik. So, you have a very large platform. You've got your NLP training, your radio host, your hosting, your books. Obviously, there's a simple way to find you, Rik.
Lifebeyondlimits.com.au.
Yay. Is there
That's probably
anything
the
else there
easiest.
that you want to add, Rik?
No, look, the last thing that I'd like to add is, you're probably watching this for a good reason. And, everything that you watch or consume typically is an opportunity that says there's something in front of you that you need to do now. And be courageous. Just follow whatever that is. If it's get into coaching, get into coaching. If it's to get a coach, get a coach. If it's to, make that decision that you've been avoiding, make that decision. It's courage. Your courage muscle grows as you become more courageous. So it's just like any other muscle. You've got to keep working it. You've got to be a bit scared in life in order to build your muscle. I mean, look at Claire right now. Look how great she is. Look at all the great work she's doing. Me, myself, I've been scared too. We've all been scared. Don't think that just because we've written a book or we get out there and train or because we've done a YouTube or whatever that we're absolutely fearless. It's completely untrue. We are fearful too, but we know the signals and know that fear is a signal that tells you it's time to do something.
Yay. That's awesome. What a brilliant highlight to finish on. Thank you,
You're
Rik.
welcome. Thank you.
It has been wonderful spending this time with you. And as I always say, I will talk to you later.
Cool, buddy. And I want to compliment you on such great questions that you've asked. It just really clarifies how much you know. And, I want to applaud you
Oh,
on the
thank you.
incredible depths of knowledge that you have and the great work that you're doing out there.
Thank you. Yeah, it was my intention to ask some juicy questions. Just get you thinking.
You certainly did that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And as I said, I will talk to you later.
Cool, buddy. Thank you kindly.